What really happened to Klaus Schwab? That's not a question I was particularly concerned with until I heard somebody else ask it. And I thought, why would you ask that? Obviously, he got old and retired, right? That's what happens. He's not a young guy. He loomed large over the COVID pandemic, of course, and his "you will own nothing and be happy" became the catch cry of his globalist minions like Jacinta Ardern and various other world leaders, Emmanuel Macron, and of course, who can forget Justin Castro. He seemed to be a figure that came out of the shadows and loomed large over global politics, seemed to be very, very influential, disproportionately so, I will say, during the COVID era. But honestly, I'll admit, I didn't think too hard about his stepping down as leader of the World Economic Forum until I read a post by George Christensen. So I thought I'd bring George on to the Topher Project to have a chat. George, how are you?
Very good, Topher. Good to be with you.
I want to say thank you for bringing this to my attention because honestly, like I said, it's not something that I really thought to read into too much or to try and unearth too much of what was really going on. It just appeared to be an old guy having reached the end of his shelf life and was now stepping down. You've got a different perspective on this.
Yeah, look, he announced, Klaus Schwab, that is, announced I think a year ago almost, that he was going to start stepping down from duties. So at a face level, everyone just thought, oh, well, this is just his full retirement happening right now because he's an old bloke. But it was anything but. Actually, the resignation was very, very sudden. It happened immediately after, as I understand, emergency board meeting of the WEF that happened over the Easter weekend, where he was practically frog marched out of the Davos building that they had there. What had became aware, there was a number of whistleblowers that came forward who alleged years of misconduct, years of abuse of power, years of corruption within the WEF by Schwab, using the funds, the organisational funds of the World Economic Forum. And you got to imagine that is largesse. Like, it is not a cheap thing to go to Davos for anyone. I mean, when they got these titans of multinational companies that come from left, right, and centre and descend on the place, they're sparing no expense and paying huge fees. So there was a lot of wealth within the WEF. He used that for personal luxuries, and that's a reality. I could just give you some. I'm just reading some of the receipts here. He used his junior staffers as personal cash couriers. He withdrew thousands on the company dime for his own personal use. The titillating bit, I guess, is that he billed luxury in-room massages to the forum's account. And his wife, Hilda, who was actually also a central figure in the forum's operations, has apparently allegedly arranged lavish getaways that were disguised as business trips. Together, they had a multi-million-dollar villa that was paid for by corporate donors to the WEF, and they used that as their personal retreat. So none of this, when you take the whole package, you can't say any of it was just an aberration. There was a pattern of corruption within the WEF, and it began at the very top.
But there's a few things that crossed my mind here, George. Firstly, I thought it was common knowledge that non-government organizations, these big international charities, and especially things like the World Economic Forum, are just giant money laundering corruption machines. I'm almost surprised that people are surprised by these revelations. And frankly, the thing that surprises me most is that this would be the cause of him being pushed out. I have to assume that there was someone who wanted him out for their own purposes, and this simply became the excuse, because this cannot be considered unusual behavior from the leaders of these sorts of organizations.
Yeah, look, and I've researched and written as much as that I could on this, because beyond that is speculation, I guess. But you're right. I mean, this sort of stuff was known actually by people. Really, it was known. So why is it all coming to light and being used as an excuse to push him out the door? Perhaps something else was going on. Perhaps he overstayed his welcome. Perhaps he ticked off the wrong people within the organisation. Perhaps his replacement, who's a man by the name of Peter Math, was too hungry for the job right now. So any of those things are a possibility. None of them are a possibility. But nonetheless, he's out. Peter Letmath is in. He's got also an interesting story behind him as well.
I hope you're enjoying this interview with George Christensen. My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I am 100% viewer supported. So head over to Good Christians, or Good People, Break Bad Laws, where you'll find my books, including Good Christians Break Bad Laws, about the theology of disobedience, as well as Good People Break Bad Laws. This is about civil disobedience in the modern age. And then Battleground Melbourne, the award-winning DVD for the documentary that I made about the world's most locked down city, Melbourne, Australia, my home. I lived through it, and I've told the story of my beautiful state of Victoria and the incredible, courageous people that stood up during that time. There are, of course, also my T-shirts and my hoodies, etc. That's how I pay my bills. So if you're enjoying this work, if you're enjoying the Topher Project, please support me in that way. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get back to the interview with George. Well, that's what I wanted to get to, because there might be a sigh of relief. Certainly there was for me initially when he announced, or when I discovered that he was now formally stepping down entirely. There was a sense of, oh, good, I won't have to see his face again. And perhaps the World Economic Forum will cease to be quite as evil as what it has been, in my opinion. But if his replacement is anything to go by, that might be a false hope.
Yeah, look, Peter Letmath, if if you could have cast another person that looked like a Bond villain, you wouldn't have done any better than this guy. And wait until you hear the background, because it is like a Bond villain. I mean, he is a name that the media barely mentions, but actually he's the former long-serving CEO of Nestle, and that is one of the most powerful food organizations in the world. It doesn't just run chocolates; it does a lot of food and beverages. And his infamy, I guess, the thing that he's infamous for, is pushing a line repeatedly about water not being really a human right. His view was that that this is something that should be corporatized, that humans are entitled to a little bit of water each, but actually most water should be corporatized. And it wasn't just a view, it was actually something he put into practice at Nestle. They went around buying up global water rights, extracting billions in profits, while towns, for instance, like Flint in Michigan, actually choked on poisonous water. They were taking all the fresh water that was nearby. So even in the United States, imagine if they're doing this in first world countries, what the hell was going on in third world countries. And I can tell you one thing that was going on in third world countries. They were using slave labor as part of their chocolate line, child slave labor. That was very well known under Peter Brabeck Letmath's reign. And also in the Philippines, there was a union leader. They actually have, instead of having unions across industries, they have unions for companies. So the Nestle union leader was actually killed under the watch of, not saying he was involved, of course, but while Peter Brabeck Letmath was actually in charge of Nestle, there was a huge strike, and it just so happened that the ringleader of the strike wound up dead. So, you know, there's a lot of history there that is not good. It's not good at all.
He's not friends with the Clintons, is he, by any chance? It could be, I don't know, it just sounds like a familiar story there. I feel like I've heard that one before. So has he laid out any vision? Has he said what's going to change under his leadership at the World Economic Forum? The forum is an interesting beast to begin with, for those that may not know. It doesn't technically have any direct power, but it has become a meeting point for the rich and the powerful, and they do make deals there, and they do come home and act on those deals. So whilst the World Economic Forum is not the UN, it doesn't have any kind of ability to enforce any of the decisions or the agreements made in its own right, it does seem to have an awful lot of world leaders in thrall. And so therefore decisions like what might be made by this incoming CEO do affect us even all the way here in Australia. So is there any indication from him as to the direction that he might want to take the World Economic Forum in?
No, there's been none. It's just going to be business as usual, and that's normally what would happen here. I mean, the beast is bigger than the ringmaster, and so Klaus Schwab has moved on, but the beast continues. Its core is the same, the ideology is the same, the mission is the same, and you're right, it has become something that is extremely influential, despite the fact that it actually isn't got anything to do with government, international government, national government, or anything. Its tentacles reach into governments. Of course, there was a famous line from Klaus Schwab, "We penetrate the cabinets," and certainly they did penetrate the cabinets in New Zealand and Canada, throughout Europe as well. There are even people within the Australian Parliament and the Australian government that have ties, significant ties to the WEF, both on Labor and Liberal side. So they're going to continue their push for a world that is has less freedoms, a world that is more restrictive under the guise of security and safety. They're going to continue to push for technocracy, which is ultimately what the WEF is all about, replacing the rule of the people, democracy, by the rule of the so-called experts, technocracy. And we saw where that led under COVID. So that is the mantra. And on top of that, there's this perverse sort of thing that Klaus Schwab pushed, but it actually is ingrained in the organization now. And that is the view that we should have this fusion of machine and human, transhumanism, where we go to another higher level of existence through AI and through robotics and computers, which is extremely bizarre, but actually a very real push. Can I just say that you said it has no direct power? This is true, apart from one little thing. The outlook, the mission, the goals of the WEF are now actually fused with the United Nations. They signed a compact only a year or so ago where they agreed that they would work together. And it wasn't just the WEF taking on the UN's 2030 goals. Actually, it was a two-way street. So the WEF now does have a lot of power. It's unbelievable that this private organization has been able to extract that much influence now, that there is this symbiosis in terms of goals between the UN and the WEF.
Mm. Well, George, I thank you for bringing it to my attention. The truth behind this, he was found to be corrupt, but honestly, I have to suspect that the people pushing him out were even more corrupt, because, as you said, that corruption was well known for quite some time. So I don't think that was the real reason. I don't think that was really what was going on. And I have to suspect and trust my gut here that this is a little bit of an out of the frying pan and into the fire kind of a moment. Here at the Topher Project, I will continue to follow this story. I will continue to stay in touch with you, George, as this progresses. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the Topher Project.
Thank you very much, Topher.